What if your survival depended not on your strength, but your sacrifice? For thousands of years, people believed the gods were hungry, and only blood could feed them. They demanded offerings of wine, of meat, and sometimes even of still-beating human hearts. But why did they believe this worked? And what does that belief say about us today? Welcome to the mysteries of mythology. Why do gods need sacrifices? Welcome back, mystics. Human sacrifice wasn't some dark exception in history. It was practiced across the ancient world. Even stranger, some people volunteered for it. Chicahua stood at the base of the pyramid, sun blazing on his bare shoulders. The hot sun burned beneath his feet. A line of men waited before him, some smiling at the sky, knowing they'd soon join their great god. Others were bound and screaming, prisoners from distant villages. The man in front fell to his knees, weeping as he realized what was about to happen. But Chicahua stood still. He had not been captured. He had chosen this. His family would be honored. His brother would become a warrior, and his name would be remembered in festival chants. Most importantly, his sacrifice would feed Huitzilopochtli, the sun god, so he could continue nourishing the earth and fighting his eternal enemy, Coyolxauhqui, the moon goddess. Each drop of Chicahua's blood would strengthen the sun god, each beat of his heart fuel for dawn. He had witnessed this ritual as a boy. The blood, the chanting, the way the bodies tumbled down the temple stairs like broken dolls. Now, he was one of them. Step by step, Chicahua climbed the steep stone pyramid. Each level brought him closer to the heavens, closer to his destiny. The crowd below grew smaller, their chants fainter. Only the wind and his own heartbeat filled his ears. At the summit, the altar waited. Dark stone stained with the offerings of countless others who had walked the same path. The priests swayed in trance, their mouths stained with the sacred pulque wine, and their breath heavy with sacred mushrooms that helped them speak to the divine. The gods were near, and they were hungry. Chicahua believed his death kept the world alive, but he wasn't alone. Across time and continents, others did too. So what was Chicahua's sacrifice really about? He wasn't just dying for the sun, he was making a deal. The same kind of deal humans have always tried to make with the divine. Why pour your wine into the dirt? Why burn meat on an altar? What if sacrifice wasn't about fear or cruelty, but about etiquette? Imagine living 5,000 years ago. The world around you isn't just soil and sky. It's conscious, it watches, it listens. The river has a spirit, the wind has a will, the mountain watches you with ancient eyes. In that kind of a world, nothing happens by chance. When your crops grow, something helped. When lightning strikes, someone's angry. When your child recovers from fever, someone showed mercy. And when you receive a blessing, what do? You say thank you. Anthropologist Edward Taylor believed this is how sacrifice began. It started as a gesture of goodwill, a kind of divine diplomacy. Just like you wouldn't enter someone's home and ask for favors empty-handed, the same courtesy applied to the divine. The Romans had a phrase for it, do ut des, I give so that you may give. A cosmic transaction, give something, get something. In ancient Greece, families poured out the first sip of wine on their doorstep before dinner, a toast to the spirits of the home. Celtic warriors hurled their finest swords into sacred lakes, hoping the water gods would grant them victory. Gods, like people, could be flattered, bargained with, even bribed. The gods were like powerful relatives, distant and dangerous, but still family. And family takes care of its own. French anthropologist Marcel Mauss wrote one of the most influential works in social science, The Gift. He showed that gifts are never truly free. Even today, when you give someone a present, you're saying we have a connection now, or that you expect something in return, even if it's just gratitude. So imagine what it meant to give something to a god. Some sacrifices went even deeper than transaction, beyond trade, beyond bargaining. It was about belonging. Scottish scholar William Robert Smith saw this clearly. He argued that early sacrifices weren't just gifts to the gods, they were meals with the gods. In ancient Greece, when animals were sacrificed, they were carefully divided. The bones and fat were burned at the altar, their smoke rising skyward to feed the divine. The meat, that went to the people. It wasn't just an offering, it was a dinner party, a sacred meal where the boundary between the mortal and divine grew thin. By eating together, humans and gods, you became part of the same community. And we see that everywhere. In Yoruba tradition, offerings of honey, rum, and flowers aren't just tributes, they're invitations. Come, taste, stay a while. In Shinto shrines, rice and sake are left out not because the spirits are hungry, but because hospitality builds the bond. Food becomes a bridge, a language of reverence. Here, sacrifice isn't about power or fear, it's about presence. It says, we share the same world, we are not alone. Maybe that's what we're really after all along. Not just divine favor, but divine intimacy. A moment when the gods sit at our table and we stop being supplicants in the dark and start being guests in a shared cosmic home. Sometimes sacrifice wasn't about sharing, it was about surviving. Because what happened when a sacred meal wasn't enough? When wine poured into the earth brought only dust, and meat burned on the altar brought no rain, only silence. For many ancient people, the answer came down to one word: sin. Someone, somewhere, had broken a cosmic rule. A sacred promise had been violated, and now the gods were angry. This was sacrifice at its darkest, born not from love or gratitude, but from fear. The gods were no longer family. They were judges, and you were standing trial. In Greek myth, this terror takes shape in the story of Iphigenia. The Greek fleet had gathered at Aulis, ready to sail for Troy, but the winds died and the sea went silent. It wasn't chance. The seer Calchas revealed the cause. King Agamemnon had offended the goddess Artemis, and the only way to make the winds return was to sacrifice his daughter. The cost of war wasn't gold or blood, it was a child. This logic appears everywhere. When plague struck, altars are built. When drought came, bulls were slaughtered. When nations faced crisis, the price grew steeper. The reasoning was brutal but clear. If the world had gone out of balance, someone had to pay to restore it. A bad harvest might cost the sheep, a drought might demand a bull, but a national crisis, it would cost a human life. It's easy to view this as cruelty, but to them, it was cosmic accounting. The universe, they believed, kept books, and debts were paid in flesh. Sometimes sacrifice wasn't about survival or divine favor. It was about something harder to define: guilt. In the Hebrew Bible, sacrifice wasn't one size fits all. There were burnt offerings, sin offerings, guilt offerings, each one with a different kind of impurity. Touch a corpse, you need purification. Commit adultery, you need atonement. Feel a nameless guilt pressing against your chest, there was a ritual for that too. The temple wasn't just a place of worship, it was a spiritual hospital. And sacrifice was the medicine. But why did it feel so necessary? Neurologist Sigmund Freud believed it came from the ancestral guilt, a buried memory of ancient violence. Religion, he said, began in shame. Sacrifice was how we said, again and again, we're sorry for what we did. Carl Jung saw it differently. To him, sacrifice meant transformation, a symbolic death to make room for something new. The ego burned on the altar so a deeper self could rise. But anthropologists ask a harder question. Who decided what counted as sin? Who chose the offerings? And who benefited? Because often, sacrifice wasn't just spiritual, it was political. The priests kept the meat, they held the power. The gods may have demanded it, but very human hands collected it. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the one being sacrificed had no choice. The slave thrown in the river, the prisoner burned alive, the child buried beneath the city wall. Not every offering was willing, not every ritual was just. Some sacrifices fed the gods, others held entire empires together. Now we reach the most unsettling kind of offering, the giving of a human life. To understand it, we need to enter a radical different worldview. Imagine believing the sun only rises because the gods died to make it happen. That the earth doesn't just sit beneath your feet, it's held together by divine blood. That every day is a cosmic battle, and your life might be the only weapon that decides its outcome. This was at the heart of Aztec belief. To them, the universe wasn't a self-sustaining machine. It was fragile, alive, and always hungry. The gods had sacrificed themselves to create the world. They had leapt into fire, cut out their own hearts, bled themselves dry, all so humans could exist. Nanahuatzin, the humble sun god, threw himself into flame to light the sky. Ehecatl, the wind god, gave his life to set the sun in motion. Now, it was humanity's turn to repay the debt. Each dawn posed a question. Would the sun rise again? Only if the gods were fed. Blood was the currency, hearts were the highest form of payment. At the temple of Tenochtitlan, these rituals weren't sadistic displays. The Aztecs didn't see sacrifice as cruelty. They saw it as responsibility, and to some, it was even an honor. A few were chosen for their beauty, strength, or bravery. Aztec warriors might volunteer, believing their death would turn them into stars or divine messengers. Some Inca children were raised from birth for sacred ceremonies, not as victims, but as guardians of the mountains. Their lives didn't end. They were believed to transform, to return to the divine source. But not all offerings were willing, and here comes the hardest truth. In the Inca Empire, during the Capacoca ceremony, children were drugged with maize beer and cocoa leaves and left to freeze in the high Andes. Their spirits, it was believed, would protect the sacred peaks forever. In Carthage, during moments of crisis, infants were burned in the arms of Moloch. Drums drowned out their cries as parents offered their lives to shield the city. In ancient Egypt, wives and servants were buried beside dead kings so they could serve him in the afterlife. And in other cultures, slaves were thrown into rivers, prisoners were burned alive, children were buried beneath city walls. These weren't chosen heroes, these weren't volunteers. It's tempting to view these acts as monstrous, but that ignores the deeper, harder truth. When society believes that killing one life will save many, consent becomes negotiable. Who chose these victims? Did they agree? Could they? Some were honored, some were raised for it, but many were not. They were sacrificed not from devotion, but because they couldn't refuse. And that's what makes sacrifice both the most sacred and the most terrifying idea humanity has ever believed. that taking one life might save the world. One sacrifice changed everything. About 2,000 years ago, a Jewish teacher named Jesus walked to a hill outside of Jerusalem. He was executed by Roman authorities, and in that moment, the entire logic of sacrifice shifted. Divine sacrifice wasn't new. The Aztec gods had burned themselves to light the sky. Egyptian deities had died and been reborn, and Greek myths told of gods suffering from mortals. But Christianity introduced something different. A God who entered history to end the cycle of sacrifice forever. Jesus became the Lamb of God, not just another offering, but the final offering. The sacrifice to end all sacrifices. No more bulls bleeding at altars, no more doves burned for sin, no more smoke to feed divine hunger, no more hearts cut out from the chest. Of course, the shift didn't happen overnight. Early Christians debated what sacrifice meant. Some communities still performed rituals for generations, but the arc had started to turn. Sacrifice had moved inwards. The offering wasn't blood anymore, it was the self. Repentance, humility, surrender, these became the new sacrifices. The Apostle Paul wrote that believers should offer their bodies as living sacrifice, not death but life devoted to something greater. The altar didn't vanish, it became invisible, carried inside of every believer. We like to think we've moved past this ancient logic, but what if we haven't? What if the sacrifice didn't disappear? It just changed shape. Even as religion moved away from fire and blood, the language of sacrifice never left us. It just changed its form. We still speak of sacrifice every day. Soldiers make the ultimate sacrifice. Parents sacrifice their careers for their children. Artists sacrifice comfort for their craft. We fast during Ramadan, give up luxuries for Lent, skip meals to feed the hungry, work overtime to help someone else succeed. These aren't temple rituals, but they follow the same ancient logic, giving something up to serve something greater. In psychology, these are symbolic deaths. You burn part of yourself to grow. You give up the old identity to become someone new. The gods may have different names now. Justice, truth, progress, love, but we're still laying offerings on their altars. And maybe we always will. Because maybe sacrifice was never really about what the gods needed. Maybe it was about what we needed. A way to turn loss into meaning, pain into purpose, death into rebirth. The altar is still there. We just carry it inside of us now. We began with Chicahua choosing to die for something greater than himself. We've seen sacrifice as a gift, as meal, as payment, as transaction. And maybe we've learned this. The gods may have changed, but the need to give something up for them, something greater, that's still with us. So what are you sacrificing today? And is it worth the offering? As always, mystics, thank you for watching and see you in the next video.